Okay, thank you. Other questions by senators at this point?
How extensive do you want to get into this?
Well,
What is your plan?
my guess is, and the recommendation of staff is that this item be held over until after the May revise when we see what other funding is available. So I think anything we need to know in advance, you want to ask about now so folks can work on issues that are of concern to you. So as deep as you want to get, I guess, Senator Lynn.
Thank you. I just want to add, I'll start with Hastings. You're dropping your enrollment by 10%. So, correct?
Correct.
For how many more years?
The overall reduction over a 3-year period has been a 20% decline.
Okay.
Yeah, so this, because we're a 3-year program, to permanently reduce your enrollment, you need to phase that in. So fall 2014 will be our final tranche of that 3-year process.
And your students, what kind of job placements have they, or not only success for getting their degree or getting their license, but also job placements?
Well, job placements are measured by 2 criteria: job at graduation, a job placement at graduation, job placement 9 months out.
9 months out.
Yeah, 9 months out. We are probably at about 78%, and I could get you the exact figure. At graduation is a much lower number because the bar exam results are not released until November, December, and many employers don't make final hiring decisions. But the job placement rate has been adversely affected by changes in the marketplace.
Correct.
We could continue to fill the seats that we previously had, but that would not necessarily be the responsible course of action, given that, to have a student invest 3 years of their educational career, have them incur a large amount of debt. Our average indebtedness at graduation law school only is $119,000.
Oh, wow.
And so a major objective is to sort of reduce what we produce in order to better tailor it to the needs of the marketplace.
How many of your students, your graduates, get into public law?
Oh my goodness, I would have to say, I don't have that data, but it's over 60%, 50 to 60%.
It'd be a hard place to have a young person come into public law and have a debt of $100,000, over $100,000.
It truly affects career decisions. Many students have to not pursue the dream they would prefer to pursue in order to address the financial obligations that attendance at law school has created. Hence, as I said earlier, the funding provided by the governor's budget really helps us manage that enrollment decline with the significant revenue implications. Our students have been very active in advocating for supplemental funding to fund transitional programs, Lawyers for America, summer grants.
Correct. Correct. So, how can the state assist other than money?
They could hire our graduates.
That's right. They do.
The public sector, yes.
Right.
We are very student-centric, and that's in part because of our smallness. My colleagues have the privilege of running, incredibly large, incredibly complex systems. Hastings next year will have an enrollment of slightly under 1,000 students. We do get to know our students, and we get to know them well.
Well, how can we solve this problem? In some programs, we think about the student debt. If you place yourself in 7 years in a particular situation that's perhaps
federal programs.
Okay, then you get a discount off of your debt, that kind of thing.
And those programs are being scaled back at the federal level, and
And they never existed at the state level?
There is a statutory program that has never been funded at the state level. And I can't remember the exact citation number, but there is a program that allows for public interest loan forgiveness that is statutorily existent but has never, ever been funded.
Okay,
and
it's like,
probably
it's
25
like the
years
Apple
old.
for education for teachers and things like that.
Yep.
Okay, is there a need for public lawyers in the public
Well,
arena?
absolutely. I mean, the level of unmet need in public sector, public service functions is huge. We talk about the fact that there are too many lawyers, et cetera, but even given that the existence of that condition, there are still unmet needs that are not being addressed, that students, lawyers who are not encumbered by burdensome debt loads could help address.
Okay, this is just a little segment of this conversation, but it would be helpful to me just to have kind of an analysis of what the unmet needs are and how perhaps you could
more than
play
happy to see
a
that.
role in that. When it comes to both the CSUs and the UCs, the PPIC has come out with this study that says that we need X number of a million more bachelor degrees. Have you thought about how you're going to address that issue and help the state get there? Have you thought about that in your sustainability plans? How we're going to get there?
Well, we're going to get there through a partnership with the state, quite frankly. And we're not going to do it on our own. Clearly,
Are you just talking about then, Mr. Lenz, just money?
No, I'm not talking about just money, although we've been without money for a very long time. We've been without a state investment for a very long time.
Correct.
So
well, I mean, it's not anyone's
It's been
fault.
a challenge.
Yeah, correct.
So this is a partnership. And here's the partnership. And it goes along the lines of a lot of the discussion that you've been having around performance measures. Okay? The partnership is you make an investment for a level of expectations, and we need to meet that expectations. So, for instance, if the expectation is that we're going to dramatically expand the number of applicants coming to the University of California to try to meet that million need, we need enrollment funding to be able to do that. What you need from us is an assurance that when we get that enrollment funding, that we're investing in the faculty and the course sections to continue to make improvements in our time to degree and our success with students in graduating in a timely fashion. So it is a partnership. It is an expectation, but part of this has been a challenge. Even though we at the University of California we've continued to make progress during the tough fiscal times, we're concerned about the level of sustainability in the future. In fact, if there is no additional funding to be able to take more California residents.
I mean, it's been going on for a good generation that the University of California has not been accepting California kids, a lot of California kids. And so a lot of kids in my district, go out of state for their four-year bachelor degrees, and we lose them, and they don't come back. So I'm concerned, and they're all qualified. They really are qualified.
Well, but here's the dilemma. We're meeting the master plan. We're taking the top 12.5%. We're serving 7,500 students at a cost of $75 million more than the state has ever provided us funding. That's not sustainable. At some point, the state has to reinvest in their expectations for us to serve more California residents, or we won't have an ability to do that.
So how under capacity are you right now? What more can you take? How many more kids can you take?
We are looking in the near term of about 1% enrollment growth for the next few years.
1%?
1% enrollment growth. Well, we have no basis for anything else. We haven't had enrollment funding since 2007.
I know. We're really trying to get away from enrollment growth, not to preclude access, but really to give you an opportunity to, meet state demands. If we need 1 million more kids coming out of our systems with bachelor degrees, then I need to know what your capacity is.
We have no ability to do it for free. Take a look. I passed out a handout. Take a look at page 3 and page 4. These are two examples. Page 3 demonstrates the level of funding versus the budgeted enrollment and the actual enrollment for California residents for the University of California, and you can see that gap. Page 4 represents the dilemma that we've had as a result of the state cuts. Our new faculty dropped significantly here. We, for the first time in our history, were actually losing more faculty than we had an ability to replace. Now, we've made some progress in our efforts, as you can see in 12-13, and we'll continue to make some progress to take on more faculty. But, Senator Liu, as you well know, the academic infrastructure has to be in place. Otherwise, all we're doing is we're taking the students, We're not going to be able to assure them that they can get the course sections or have the faculty to move them through in a timely fashion. And given the level of tuition, that's not fair to those students and their family.
Then how does our partners in the nonprofit sector get their kids out
They
in 4
raise
years?
tuition.
Well,
They have an ability to raise tuition to whatever level it takes in order to be able to have those resources in place and move those kids through in a timely fashion.
they do it a little better than we do. And we
Yes, they do. They raise tuition a lot better than we do.
No, not in terms of raising tuition. I mean, in terms of, because we know we give grants and all this kind of stuff, and they give a package to kids as well as you do. And I'm just wondering whether or not
Sure.
we can be
in
more
fairness,
efficient about it.
And in fairness, you have to take a look at the caliber of students that they're taking. So, for instance, the students coming to the university, we serve 42% Pell Grant students, low-income, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, 42%. When you take look at the University of Michigan, they serve 17%. Virginia, 13%. We serve more Pell Grant students at just 4 of our institutions than the entire Ivy League combined. So clearly what they are doing is they have an ability to look at those applications coming in and take the kind of students that have the background to be able to progress in a far more timely fashion. It's not a level playing field by any means.
Okay, what I'd like to do is move through the senators for
Right.
questions and come back if we have more. Senator Welland?
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator Liu, for those questions. Unfortunately, we really don't have the time, given the importance, and that's the way this place runs, to really develop and go into those questions. But I think we need to know that. And hopefully we'll get a little bit more for the next round. Regarding Hastings, it'd be very helpful, I think, to see some of that data as to the employment, and I assume you have a breakdown as to where
Yes,
they
we
go.
have all that data.
Why do you keep that data? Is there a statutory or regulatory requirement to do that?
No, not that I'm aware of. It's mainly for consumer purposes.
Yeah.
It's incumbent on us to give data that allows students to make the determination of the value equation. And a student can elect to go to an institution that has, a data set that suggests higher success rates for certain types of practice than others, but it's all about consumer information and full disclosure.
And so does that include bar passage rates as well?
Our pass rates, all of our metrics are out there, and it's just part of the decision-making process that is just, sort of part of that equation that people make.
I would like to see some of that for the next go-around. And the only comment I would make there, we have lots of ways of measuring the strength of the economy. But frankly, I think one of those is the demand for lawyers. A modern economy, our economy, needs them, not just in public government jobs, but as well for the economy. And there may be a lot of retirements, and I assume, to segue over to the UC and CSU, I'm making an assumption, but tell me if this is right, that as the baby boom generation starts to retire, there's going to be a little bit more turnover than maybe there would be historically if it were all even. Is that correct?
I think generally, yeah. I think that's what the root of the PPIC report is about, is having that $1 million need for more degrees. I wish Senator Liu was still here, because I was going to kind of follow up on Mr. Lenz's comment and say, for the CSU, I think we're tackling this in 2 pieces. First, we're tackling it from new enrollments, and we're tackling it from better, what we, for shorthand purposes, throughput. Okay.
I just want to interject. I'm thinking about faculty retirements, and what you're saying is that the need then for more faculty, that's what you're talking about.
Well, that's part of it, but I'm also talking about just the major issue, the need for more baccalaureates coming out of the
Well-
institutions. But no, you're right. I mean, I think part of our plan is one of the tenets of our budget is the Student Success and Completion Initiative that the Chancellor spoke about during his State of the CSU. And part of that is to invest money in more tenure-track faculty to deal with not only the retirements, but the separations, but also the increasing need for serving more, greater numbers of enrolled students. So I think it's like a two-prong on that front.
Senator Weiland, if I might add,
Sure.
you're touching in an area that I can appreciate the level of concern, because where we have a significant concern is not only at the faculty level, but in the STEM fields. The potential retirement age and the overwhelming demand for nurses, physicians, engineers, scientists, all those areas that are high-level professional, sorely needed, are a big concern in our ability to be able to produce not just the number of four-year degrees to get to that $1 million target, but in particular, these STEM fields that are critical to the future economy of California.
Well, I'm glad you actually mentioned that, too, because I think that's an important issue. And I'm a little confused by it, but I suspect you're right. I get the Chronicle for Higher Education, and when I have time, I look at it. And it was interesting. They had, a few months ago, an article saying that it was a myth that we weren't graduating enough students with STEM degrees. On the other hand, when I talk to private industry, they say we don't have enough. That's right. So I tend to think that that's probably the case. Are you finding some institutions are finding that more students are enrolling in those fields where I think it was very common previously? A lot of students would say before they, or declare whatever, before they, as they came into college, they wanted to go in those fields, and after about a year of it, it declined quite a bit because they're hard. Do you have that data?
I'm sure we do. I don't know it off the top of my head, but let me give you an example. One of the successes of UC Merced is the fact that they offer a lot of STEM majors. In fact, so much so that we're at a bit of a crossroads internally as using Merced as a referral institution. And the reason why is that the demand for those STEM majors have now gotten so many applicants to choose Merced as their first campus of choice, because they can get those degrees at Merced, that they're challenged in being a referral pool. And we have a concern about not turning away the student whose first choice is coming to Merced because they want to get into the STEM fields versus a student we might have to take from the referral pool. So the demand is
The demand is there.
Okay, at this point, we're going to have each senator ask another question or two if they wish, and then we'll move on to the next panel. One of my questions, we talk a lot about enrollment and increasing enrollment. I mean, to me, that's not the important measure. The important measure is increasing graduation. And especially when we see graduation, 4 or 6 year graduation rates at 16 or 23% or wherever they might be now, it's much more difficult to increase graduation. Senator Liu's done some work on student success, and we're seeing some of the results of that now, but that'd be much more expensive. So how do we reach this 1 million more bachelor's degrees? It doesn't mean enrolling 1 million more people, because if only 16% of them complete, we're not there still. What do we do?
Well, I'll take a stab at it because I wanted to kind of come back and talk about it. Senator Liu, thank you for coming back, and I can. I'd mentioned just general enrollments. Just we need to increase CSU's enrollments by a lot, but one of the things that the Chancellor has really focused on, and especially on the State of the CSU, is the Student Success and Completion Initiative. And built within that are a number of different pieces that can improve the throughput or increase graduation rates. Last night at the Assembly Budget Committee hearing, we had our data expert, and he indicated that even though our 16% four-year graduation rate looks terrible on paper, we used to be 8% decades ago. So we are on an upward tick just in terms of being a university that is on the move going forward. And we have a different student population. You all know that we have quite a bit different population of students. But part of those things some of those things that are really important to the throughput are better advising. And so that's part of the student success and completion, is to add more advisors so that we have students who are on track to graduate and graduate in time. We also have one piece of it that's trying to engage students in more high-impact practices. And high-impact practices can be an internship, assisting with applied research. It could be surely just involved in your university more than just going to your class and getting off of campus. That's part of it. And the other thing, too, is a lot of our student preparation work that has begun, and we have part of it in place, which is the early assessment program. But then our early start program is still getting up and running as well. And I would be remiss to not mention that the SB 1440 move. I mean, we are working very closely with community colleges to make sure that we have students, which are half of our new students, mind you, are from the community colleges, working on making sure that they are taking those courses they need so that when they hit the ground running at CSU, that they're more prepared already and that they're able to move through the system quickly. So I think it's a combination of new enrollments and a combination of better throughput once students are there. And right now we're in a little bit of a tough spot.
Mr. Chairman, actually, I agree with you on your point, but I think that there has to be a balance. So we haven't had any additional funding from the state for enrollment growth from 2007, and I mentioned earlier that that's not sustainable. I'm not also indicating that what we ought to have is massive amount of funding for enrollment growth, because quite frankly, it's not just the academic infrastructure. We don't have the physical plant to be able to serve those students, the classrooms and the labs. What we're trying to find is a balance. Whether you provide us enrollment growth or not, we're going to grow UC Merced by 650 students. We have to. We've got to get them to a level of 10,000 students to make them sustainable. Whether you give us enrollment growth or not, we're going to use the online technology funding that we got from the administration to afford students an opportunity that if they need that one class left for graduation, and it's not offered at Santa Cruz, that they can go on and find that class at Irvine and take that and not have to take another semester and pay for another semester and be able to graduate in a timely fashion. Our faculty are consistently looking at course sections and degree requirements for purposes of trying to ensure that those students are only taking the amount of units that they need in order to be able to graduate within their major. That having been said, that's our part. But having no enrollment growth for the future not only doesn't allow us to add more students, even on the margin, but to address what I have a fear of, and that is, and I mentioned this last night, the California Community Colleges, the governor's budget proposes 3% enrollment growth for 34,000 new full-time equivalent students next year, and there's enrollment growth for the community colleges in the current year. Not all those students will pursue a four-year degree, but you can be assured a portion of them are going to be at the doorstep of UC and CSU in a very short period of time. And what is your expectation for us to take more community college students at that point in time? So there has to be a bit of a balance here. It can't be just zero funding for enrollment in the future, and it can't be a perception that we're not going to do this unless we make some concerted efforts on our own, because we're doing that.
Yeah, and this applies more to CSU than UC, but getting students out more quickly would, of course, be one way to open space for enrollment growth without additional funding. I do want to say the LAO brought up a question, I think, if I'm paraphrasing correctly, wondering how the 5% figure was arrived at by the Department of Finance in terms of 5% increases. We've heard the system talk about some of its needs and some of the things they're doing. Does that tie in to 5%?
Sure, and if I could respond to Mr. Lenz's point first, I think there's at least an issue of kind of a technical issue or an issue of how we're looking at this issue. The budget last year provided both UC and CSU with an additional $125 million. The budget for this year proposes an additional $142 million. These are dollars that are being used to enroll students. It's a core function of the university. So I think, part of the administration's approach is not to look, I think what the segments seem to be seeking is kind of money specifically directed at enrollment, and what the administration is doing is instead providing funding and expecting that they'll use it to enroll students in a way that can get them out in 4 years. But with regard to your question about the level of funding, I think taking a step back, the LAO is correct that we are not funding it traditionally like a workload type budget for other agencies, and instead I think the resource level is driven by the administration's desire to invest in the universities. And so we recognize that there are real needs, reductions from previous years, which have created a burden on students, cost increases, deferred obligations, and then the state's expectation that they improve outcomes. And so we've taken a look at the state's resources over a 4-year period, looked at the commitments that the state has in other program areas, and then decided what we can make a commitment for through 16-17. And so it's not driven by kind of necessarily increases in cost, but recognizing that there are increased needs and that the universities are going to have to prioritize in order to determine how to use an amount that the state can fund.
Whether it's 5% versus 7% or 3%, that's just kind of a random number?
I think it's based on looking at kind of the state budget as a whole and deciding what portion, if we're looking at higher education as a priority, which we are, what portion of the state's budget can we commit to the universities over a 4-year period?
Okay, thank you. Let's take one more question from each of the senators, and then maybe we'll move to the next panel. Senator Weiland.
Just a couple of comments. I think this is happening all throughout the country where we're having to make changes. There are more adjunct faculty, which upsets a lot of tenured faculty. There are more courses that are offered through internet courses. And I understand and I appreciate that the UC system is dealing with the need for STEM graduates. I think that a lot of current graduates from college right now are in positions, and I know many of them, that don't require a college degree. Part of that's our economy, and you can't get what we would like in terms of employment without an improved economy. You cannot get there. And I think there are structural reasons why the recovery hasn't provided the jobs we need that need to be addressed in a different way. Secondly, my own view is that there is some very compelling data that this notion that we need X number of new jobs and more jobs will require what we have sort of arbitrarily called a 4-year degree is not necessarily true. Other developed countries don't, as you know, don't do education the way we do it and have been pretty economically successful. I think we need to take a long, hard look at that, an honest look at that, and that coincides with a lot of the interest now in apprenticeships, and the President in his State of the Union speech talked about that. So, for example, in STEM fields, many other countries actually have gradations. They don't say, okay, we need a BS in engineering. They may have 4 or 5, which leads me to the last comment that is a lot of the box, but I think it's worth considering. Maybe people, for a variety of reasons, who don't get that 4-year degree, we ought to award, it wouldn't affect the UC as much, but we ought to award something we call a certificate. That graduation rate that you talked about from the CSUs, I've worked with many people who've attended community colleges, who've attended in an earlier era. My dad got an AA degree and went to Berkeley for a couple of semesters, gained a great deal from that, but didn't end up with a bachelor's degree. I think it's something worth considering. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Weiland. Senator Liu.
Just a last comment. I mean, I didn't mean to give Patrick a bad time here, but because we've been in this table before for several years now. And I just would challenge the higher education body, because we know the state has been starving you through these last recessions. We've been starving a lot of things during this last recession. And it's really important, and you are an important segment to the economy of our state. But to try to look at what we're doing, and I know it's hard with academia, really tough, but try to look at what we're doing and trying to put a fresh eye on how we deliver services to get our kids out. And so the challenge is, if we have a goal, I mean, if it is a state goal, then how best can we work as a partner to deliver what the state needs? So, I mean, that's just, you know, and when we come to May Revise, we'll take a look at the issue of resources, et cetera. But what I fear is that what we are doing is not sustainable in the long run. And, you know, because even state resources, I mean, the way we get our resources, as far as I'm concerned, is not sustainable. So, you know, we're going to ride these waves up and down, you know, how can we continue to do this and deliver the kind of, you know, students that we need to, you know, work out for the rest of the state. So, I mean, you know, we're all in the bucket together. We just need to find, I think, a better way of getting what we need. Thanks.
Okay, with that comment, I think the recommendation of staff and the chair's recommendation is that we hold this item open until we see the May Revise numbers and have a better idea then of what additional actions need to be taken. If there's no objection from other senators, we will hold this item open and invite the panel up for our second item under discussion items, which is a discussion of the Innovation Awards. For this, we have Finance, LAO, UCCSU, and we'll add the community colleges. And by the way, I noticed that there are several members of the public here. At the end of the discussion items, before we move to a vote on our last item, we will have public comment, as indicated on the agenda.